About time I made one of these, am I right? Hello everyone, it is I, 608 Sweater, and today I'm starting something new on my channel. Sweater's Awesome Tutorials. The aim of this is to teach you all the secrets I've learned about animation over the course of my 5 years of being an animator. While there are a few object show tutorials already out there, I feel like there are a lot of gaps that aren't filled in terms of long-term stuff, so I'm here to help with that. A lot of this stuff will apply to people who just use Adobe Animate in general, so I wouldn't suggest immediately skipping this if you're not an object show person. I should also mention that these tutorials will be using Adobe Animate CC 2024. So sorry to those who use PowerPoint, Flippy Anime Studio, Scratch, or, I don't know, paper, but these tutorials won't help you all that much. With that out of the way, let's get into the actual tutorial itself. Another thing that I forgot to mention is to make sure that your frames inside of your rig and the frames outside of your rig are equal. So I have 145 frames right here outside, and on the inside there are also 145 frames. So just keep note of that. So the first movement we're going to be doing is called a bounce back. Now, for object show rigs in general, how they work is that they're essentially a compilation of symbols in Adobe Animate, and they move using motions that are called classic twins, and I'm going to demonstrate what those look like in a second. So for a bounce back, what you do is you create a pose, as I'm going to demonstrate right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, and to move forward, you can use the period and comma keys. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames forward, and then create a set of keyframes by selecting all the layers, right click, insert keyframe. I'd highly suggest having a hotkey for this. For example, I use the A key. So now what we're going to do on this keyframe, so we have Froakie Extinguisher right here. We have his arm. What we're going to do is select it, and if for some reason it looks weird, press the Q key. So you're going to move his arm up, and we're going to go to frame picker. If you don't have frame picker enabled, it's right here on the properties panel. So you go to frame picker, and we're going to select an arm for him. We're going to go to frame 17, and now it looks as if he's asking a question. We're also going to rotate his right arm a bit and change his expression. And now he's gone from looking amused to a little puzzled. So now what we're going to do, because this looks a bit boring, is we are going to skew the legs by selecting both of them and holding Alt. Like this. If you don't use like a really current version of Adobe Animate, like you use Flash CS6, if you actually hold Alt and skew the legs, it looks like this, and that's not what we want. So if you use like an older version, what you're going to want to do is put the anchor point, which is this white dot right here, at the bottom of the legs, and then skew them. I guess you could do this in current versions of Animate too, if you find using the Alt thing too hard, but I really just recommend doing this. It's a lot easier for me. So what we're going to do is we are going to skew the legs in this direction, and what most beginners do, myself included, will do is they basically, if the legs are skewed in this direction, they will skew the leg, they will rotate the body in like the same direction. But we're not going to do that because it doesn't really look that good. So what we're going to do is move the anchor point down here to the center, or well, not the center, to like below Froakie Extinguisher, and we're going to rotate him in the opposite direction that the legs are moving in, like this. We're going to move his torso a bit, like this, and now we have successfully created our first object show pose. Now you might notice that the leg and the body are a little disconnected. So in order to fix that, all we need to do is select Froakie Extinguisher's torso and move it over to the right a bit, like this. be sure to make mental notes for your characters on where their legs align with their body. Like for example, I know Froakie Extinguisher's leg aligns with like the darker part of his body right here. So having like notes like that can really go a long way. And now we have this. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 frames forward. Also, it doesn't have to exactly be 9 frames forward. If we do it like 8 or 7 or 10 frames forward, it doesn't really matter. So we're gonna go 9 frames forward for my example's sake. We're gonna create another keyframe. You can also use this button right here to create a keyframe. Basically for bounce backs, what you do for the second set of keyframes is you create a less exaggerated pose than the one you just created. So what we're gonna do is skew the legs back a bit and then rotate the body back a bit. We're also gonna move his arm down a bit and his other arm back a bit. We're gonna align it with the leg. And now we have this. Although, if you can see, it doesn't really look like it's moving all that much. So, that either means this frame isn't as exaggerated compared to this one, or it's the other way around. So, what we're gonna do here is just slightly de-rotate this a bit. There we go, now it's better. So now what we're gonna do, between this first set of keyframes and the second set of keyframes, I'm gonna select everything, right click, create classic tween, or create motion tween if you're using Flash 8. And now we have this. You also gotta tween this part as well. So what you do for this first movement is you select everything once more, go to the properties panel, and go to this section right here, tweening, go to -100, like this. And then for this, we're gonna wanna do the opposite. +100. So now you have this. Look at that. Doesn't that look amazing? But what if I told you we can make it even better? So now what we're gonna do is go 1, 2, 3, 4 frames right before the arm switches from the straight arm to the asking arm. Let's scroll down all the way to the layer where Froakie Extinguisher's arm is. Keyframe. I'm gonna zoom in. And then we're gonna turn on this thing called onion skinning. What onion skinning does is it allows you to see the frames before and after the current frame you selected. So right now I can see that on the frames that follow after this frame, it switches and the color is green. And on the frames before this frame, it's still the straight arm and the color is blue. So what we're gonna do is we are going to stretch this arm, squish it a bit, and skew it to create a motion effect. And if you notice, the arm actually kind of passes through this arm. You're gonna want to try to avoid that as much as possible, but there are some scenarios where you kind of can't. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move this arm down a bit so it aligns with this. And now it looks like this. Whoa! Now that's spicy. That is very spicy. But we're not done yet. What we're gonna do now is we are going to go 1, 2, 3 frames into the movement, and then we're gonna select the eye and eyebrow layers right here. Then we're gonna zoom in. We're gonna make him blink right here. So basically, for me, I have my eyebrows and my eyes in separate symbols. Some people don't do that, some people do. I'd highly recommend if you did do it though, because it can just make a lot of free flow expressions, even if it may take a little more time. So for the eye, we see that frame 8 is a blink eye, right? Let me show you a cool trick. So if you select both of the eyes with shift, and you go to properties, go to first right here, and select 8, because that's a closed eye frame. It automatically sets both of them to the closed eye. You could just manually do it, but when you're trying to save time, I'd recommend doing that. So now what we're gonna do is select both of them and shift again, hold Alt, and then squish them, like this. You're gonna wanna move the eyebrows down as well. And another thing I like doing for blinks like this is I select the eyebrows and I make them angry. It's not because Froakie Extinguisher himself is angry. It's because when you blink, it looks like your eyes are like squinting, so it kind of looks like you have angry eyebrows. So now it looks like this. Dang, that's just marvelous. Although one more thing we could do to make this even better is basically we go one frame before the blink. So 2 frames after the first keyframe, create a set of keyframes, and then for this, when the eyes actually change, move it down a bit. Because before, it kind of looked like the eyes were kind of passing through, like this eye was passing through the closed eye, and that didn't really look all that good. So now we have this. Look at that. That is just stunning. You should be proud of yourself if you just did this. Let's move on to our next movement, which is called a through. Now before I get into what a through is, I'm just going to say this right now. If you want to space out your movements, basically what you do is you create one set of keyframes like this, and then on the next keyframe, you do the keyframe for when you want to do your movement. When I was first starting out, learning how to space movements looked really hard to do, but then eventually I learned how to do it, so thank goodness for that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take Froakie Extinguisher's arm and change it to this arm right here. Basically the difference between a through and a bounce back is that throughs, essentially, they keep going, whereas bounce backs, they kind of create a less exaggerated version of the pose, as we just learned. So we're gonna have Froakie Extinguisher's arm be on his hip, but we're not actually gonna have it be on his hip in this pose, in this first keyframe. So let's remove his eyebrows. Move like this. Just as a general rule, if your character moves forward in this direction, you're generally going to want to move them backward, and I'll show you what that looks like. So basically, select the legs, and as before, hold Alt to skew them in this direction. Then we're going to take the body, move the anchor point down, and rotate the torso. I think this pose is a little too exaggerated. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go a couple frames forward. Again, like the specifics, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's longer than the first tween right here, don't really worry too much about tween length. Well, unless of course it's like 500 frames long, and if that's the case, it's not really gonna look all that natural. On the second keyframe, what we're gonna do is we are going to move Froakie Extinguisher's arm further toward his hip, like this. Then we are going to take his legs, skew them more, and then rotate his torso more. Like this. And the legs are a little off here, so oh, they're even off right here as well. Yikes. No worries, we can just fix that by moving it to the right. Shift this a bit too. So now we're gonna do what we did before. Select everything. Create classic tween. I have a hotkey for that as well. It's the X key. And then make it -100. Then do the same thing here. Create classic tween. +100. Now I have this. Although, do you notice anything wrong about it? Specifically with the arm. If you said it kind of just randomly passes through, then you're right. We can fix that though. So what we're gonna do is we are going to actually create 2 keyframes. One which is 2 frames before the arm switches, and another 1 frame before the arm switches. On the frame right before the arm switches, we're going to go to frame picker, and then click the straight arm. Now what you're probably saying is, Slaughter, it's still passing through. What are you talking about? What we're going to do now then is we're going to take this arm and squish it. Squish it a bit. Like this. Squish it down. And we're going to readjust this arm. Stretch it a bit. Now, as you can see, it's still passing through a little, but as I mentioned before, it can't be perfect every time, so in a scenario like this, don't worry about it. What we're going to do now is take this arm, squish it as well, skew it, and squish it again in this direction, a bit. And now we have this. Doesn't that look much better? It looks like it's a gradually transition. And this is the principle for all throughs and how all of them should look, in my opinion. Even if it's not a character's arm going to their hip. Like, it should look like it's naturally progressing, because if it always just looks the same as I just showed you before I did this editing, it looks pretty stale. And that's a through. The next movement we're going to be doing is called a through bounce back, which, as you can guess, combines aspects of both throughs and bounce backs. Crazy, right? So, the next movement we are going to be doing is called a through bounce back. I've already created a set of keyframes, but I'll just quickly erase that. So, create a set of keyframes. Then go and create another set of keyframes, 5 frames after the first one you created. Like this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take both of Extinguisher's arms and change them to this arm right here. Make sure that you have a keyframe caddy where your arms are flipped. That makes it much easier for doing movements like these. So now you rotate them. I recommend trying to keep them as evenly rotated as possible, but it doesn't matter all too much. So now we're going to skew his legs and rotate the torso as such. Oh, forgot to change his expression. We'll do that as well. This time, let's change his mouth so that it's open. To the normal eyes, and I'm gonna go to his brow layers. And just as a note, if you use KFC brows and you're like on a blank frame and you're struggling to find the eyebrow, just click on the layer and it'll select the symbol for you. So now we're we're gonna select an angry eyebrow and a happy eyebrow? I don't know what you call it. So now it kind of looks like he's asking a question. And we're gonna move his eyes a bit like this. And now we have this. Now we're going to go some frames after. Create another set of keyframes. And instead of going back like we did with a bounce back, what we're gonna do is on this frame right here, we're gonna keep going, just like a through. So let's create another set of keyframes. Use this thing right here. Let's skew the legs. Select the torso. Oh wait, no. Hold on. One thing we need to make sure of before we do this is that the legs are aligned. Right. And the looks of it, they are. Right. So right here, his legs are aligned. But before you even create this set of keyframes right here, you need to make sure that the legs are aligned, because if you don't, it'll look weird. So now let's create set keyframes right here. Skew his legs. Rotate his torso. It's ever so slightly off. Yikes, that's worse. Alright, so now I have that. We're also gonna move his arms up a bit like this. Notice how I said a bit. Object show animations are a lot of exaggeration in it, but don't make your movements too exaggerated or else they're not really gonna look realistic. It's a healthy balance between looking cartoony and looking realistic. So now we have that. We're gonna do what we've been doing before. Select everything. Right click, create classic tween, or use your hotkey. Use -100. Create classic tween. Use +100. Now it looks like this. It keeps going like a through, but then it recedes like a bounce back, which is why it's called a bounce back. We're not done though. You still need to edit the arms. To edit the arms, we're gonna do the same thing we've been doing before, and go on the frame right before it changes for both of the arms. And for this arm, since it's a curled arm, we're actually gonna do something similar to what we did right here. Create another keyframe right here. We'll see why in just a second. So we're gonna make this arm a straight arm as well. Turn on skidding. For this arm, it's just simple since it was always a straight arm. Just stretch it a bit, skew it, morph it, do whatever. Move it down a bit so it doesn't look like it passes too much. We're gonna do the same for this arm, but then we're gonna do something to the arm before it as well. We're gonna like shrink it like this. Move it down. So now we have this. Wow. That looks really good. Let's do the same thing we did before and create a blink right here. It'll be even easier now since I know this sounds really generic, but if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you never miss videos like these when I post them. Every subscription means a lot, as I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible by the end of the year.
Besides, why wouldn't you want to know when high quality videos like this one are being posted? It's free and you can always change your mind at any point. Okay, that's all. Back to the video.
Since there's no eyebrows. Shrink the eyes. Pair the keyframe right before so the blink doesn't look weird. Move the eyes down. And now we have this. Wow. That is stunning. Let's move on to our final movement for this tutorial, which is called the follow through. For the final movement we're going to be doing a follow through, as I just mentioned. So for a follow through, what we're going to do is create a set of keyframes right here, and create another. So what we're going to do is we're going to change his arms to these arms right here. I honestly don't really know what these arms are supposed to be expressing, but that's kind of irrelevant right now, so let's just use them. So the arms are moving down. We're going to close his mouth like this and skew his legs back because we're keeping the expression the same. You don't always have to change the expression. Like in moments like this, where his pose isn't really changing all that much, there's not really much merit in changing the expression again. Although if like you're doing like drastically different poses, like this to this, I'd highly suggest changing the expression. So now we have this. We also gotta rotate the torso so it aligns with this, the legs. And now we have this. The legs are a bit off, so let's shift that to the right a bit. So now, like through, what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep going. So now we have this. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna actually take like a frame within this movement, and you're gonna select everything, move it out a bit around this length. So now we have this, and it moves like this. If you just move your hand in real life or whatever, you'll see your hand kind of like retreat after moving. If you want to, you can like slightly adjust the arms so that like it doesn't look like a complete copy of this frame, but like to be honest, it's gonna be moving, so no one's really gonna notice. I'll just move it just for the example's sake. So now we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing. Select everything. Create classic tween. -100. Create classic tween. +100. And now we're going to do something special with this one. Create classic tween, and instead of making it a classic ease, we're going to go to ease and out and quad. Now you're probably saying, but Sweater, you just told us not to use those eases. I said we would be exploring them later on. I guess now is later on, so yeah. We'll make that quad ease and out. And now we have this. Ooh. see. Although let's fix the arm so it looks a bit better. Skew these. And now we have this. This is the follow through. And just like that, you have successfully just done 4 object shell movements. Look at that. Let's look at everything we've created. That is very astounding. If you just did all of this for the first time, you should be proud of yourself. This is your first step to becoming a successful object shell animator, or really in anything animated if you don't animate object shells. That'll be all for today's tutorial, guys. If you enjoyed, please be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and do all that good stuff. If there's anything you'd like for me to cover in a future tutorial, please be sure to let me know. And if there's anything you're confused on, again, please be sure to tell me in the comments. That's all for now. Always remember that Jesus loves you, and goodbye.